end of the gardening season often means that you have a lot of peppers coming off, and they're often in different stages of ripeness. You may have some green ones, and some of them have progressed to red, and you may have planted some of the special colored ones like yellow and orange and purple and cream. Using them all mixed together can make a dish look really spectacular, and that's one of the things I'm going to do today. I'm going to make Mediterranean stuffed peppers, and you could use all one color if that's all you've got, but if you have the option, use the different ones. You can also make this dish ahead of time and freeze it, either all of them at one time because it makes 6, or you could freeze them individually, or you could eat part now and freeze the leftovers for later. So you have a lot of options. Even though this one takes a little bit more time, it's something that can be done ahead or done in batches. All right, let's look at what we've got. First thing I wanted to show you is that we're using sweet peppers. And one of the things that folks often do when they need to core them, because we don't use the seeds, is they'll take a knife and they'll cut around the core and then try to pull it out, or they'll cut the whole thing in half. But what I want to do is use the whole pepper. I don't want to cut it in half. And so what I'm going to do is press down, hold it in both hands, and press down on the core. Now this works really well under cold water. And when I get the core pressed in far enough, I'm going to take a knife and cut down over the top, because I'm going to take that much off anyway. Now this, then you're able to lift the seed ball out, putting this under cold water, and you can just pull out this, and if you've got a garbage disposal side on your sink, you can just rinse the rest away and then turn it upside down to drain. Now this we're going to save and use as the part we stuff, and this we're going to chop up so that this is actually going to go, part of this is going to go back inside the pepper. Now I've done these ahead of time, and so I'm going to set this one aside. And what you can see with the peppers is that they don't have quite the same color. The green is a little bit more drab. One of the things that happens with stuffed peppers that sometimes people don't do is that they don't parboil them ahead, and that the pepper actually cooks fairly slowly in the oven, and so that leaves the pepper undercooked when the filling is done. So this recipe calls for getting a big pan of hot boiling water and submerging the cut peppers that are just like this in this stage in that hot water for about 8 minutes. That parboils them a bit, softens them up, tenderizes them, does part of the cooking so that when they actually get in the oven, the pepper and the filling will come out being done at the same time. This recipe also calls for another ingredient, and I'm going to use rice pilaf. And this is just a mix of rice pilaf. You can get at the supermarket. If you can find wheat pilaf, that would work fine, or lentil pilaf. Now, one of the problems with using those mixes is that they're very high in sodium. And a lot of folks are worried about the sodium content, so that if you want to cut down the amount of sodium, you could make a pilaf on your own using a chicken stock or a beef stock if you chose, or you could just use rice. If you just use rice, I'd probably add a little bit of turmeric. I'd cook it in a chicken broth so that it has a little bit more flavor than plain rice. But that enables you to cut the sodium content down while still ending up with pretty much the same dish. But you can cut the sodium content in this is well over 800, which, while that's a big number, it's not that high of a percentage of the amount of sodium that the average person would eat in a day. But you can cut that way down for those who have special requirements. And then also remember that the rest of your meal can be low sodium, or the rest of your day, so that you balance what you eat at one time with the other things that you have at an individual recipe. All right. We're going to add to our skillet, which has been pre-warming here, about a tablespoon of olive oil. And again, you can use whichever kind of oil you choose. And then I have a medium onion that's been chopped up. And the tops, remember we cut the top off. This is the top part of 6 bell peppers, or sweet peppers. Also to this, I've got 2 cloves of garlic that I've chopped up. And to make it have a more Mediterranean feel to it, we have anywhere from a half to a teaspoon of curry powder, depending on how fond you are of curry. And curry is a blend of other spices, often contains some turmeric in it. And that's one of the things you'll notice, that this will give it a sweet smell. It will also give it a yellowish color. Now this will also have a sweet flavor because of the peppers. Peppers, like carrots, is a food that sweetens as it cooks. And there are a couple of reasons this may be. One is that as they cook, the sugars break down from the longer chain sugars into shorter chain sugars, which are easier for your tongue to perceive the flavor. There may also be some evaporation of some of the acid, which ends up making it taste sweeter because there's less acid there to mask the sweetness. And the third reason is simply because as they cook, the cells break down, and that enables your the flavors, the sugars to get out of the cells easier. You chew it, and that does some of that too, but the cooking breaks the cells down and makes the sweetness even more available than chewing would do. This we want to saute until it softens up somewhere from 3 to 5 minutes. So we'll let that take place, and then we'll add the next ingredients to it. Once you get it tenderized just a little bit, softened up, you want to retain as much of the color, and it's going to continue to cook, so you don't have to do it all at once. I'm adding half a pound of extra lean, or as lean as you can find, ground beef. Now the reason to make sure that you're getting it as lean as possible is because there's really no opportunity to drain the fat away on this one. Other things that I cook that include ground beef, I will use one that's got a higher fat content anytime there's an opportunity in the recipe at some point along the line to drain the fat away. The goal is to capture the flavor, but also to not have excess fat in here. So we're going to cook this until the meat is browned. Again, probably somewhere around 3 to 5 minutes, depending on the temperature of your skillet. Generally, when I cook with ground beef, I'll have a meat thermometer on hand because I want to make sure that I get the ground beef up to a temperature of at least 160 to reduce my risk of foodborne illness and that of the people who are eating the dish. In this case, if it's still not quite up to 160, I'm not going to be as concerned because this is going to go into the oven for 30 minutes at 350, actually for 40 minutes. And so the final cooking is going to take place there. So we're just going to cook this until we get most of the pink out of it, and then we'll come back and proceed. Once your mixture is cooked for that next 5 minutes, then you put it in a big bowl. Now you could leave it in the original skillet, but you want it to cool down a bit because we're going to add some ingredients to this that will become a little bit of a problem if it's still real warm. So the next thing we're going to add is the rice pilaf, or wheat pilaf, or whichever kind you've made. Now this recipe calls for the full amount. You either use 2 cups of rice and cook that up, or excuse me, 1 cup of rice, which will turn into about 2 cups, or you use the full mix. Keep in mind that this is going to end up to be more than you're going to be able to put back into the peppers that you have worked with or have ready. So the nice thing about this is that not only do you have the stuffed peppers, but you have some mixture here that also tastes real good all just by itself, so that you have a couple of things that you can either use as meals or give to friends or put in the freezer. Now there's the rice pilaf. Now remember, this has turned sweeter because of during the cooking the peppers have become sweeter, and the curry also implies a bit of a sweetness, and we're going to increase that by stirring in about 1/4 cup of raisins. We're going to add about 2 tablespoons of fresh parsley, and then I'm going to add about 1.5 cups of part skim mozzarella cheese. Now this is the ingredient that it would have a little bit of trouble. If it's too warm, it melts real quickly on you, and that's okay because it's going to melt in the oven anyway, but it gets a little bit stringy when you're trying to transfer it to the peppers. Now remember, the advantage to having lots of peppers in here, of course, is that they're very high in vitamin A and vitamin C, and as they continue to ripen, the amount of vitamin A and vitamin C actually also increases too, so that the redder they are or the yellower they are, since they both started out green in the underripe stage, that means that there's even more concentrated vitamin A and vitamin C, which are antioxidants, which are going to neutralize free radicals and reduce your risk of a variety of diseases. So that's the nutritional advantage to a dish like this. We then are going to transfer this into the peppers. If you have peppers that are uneven on the bottom, go ahead and cut a little bit off the bottom, and that will enable them to sit flat because you don't want them rolling over while you're trying to fill them up with the mixture. Fill them fairly well. You can press it down a bit, but don't overpack. Otherwise, it's going to take longer for the heat to get into the center. And it's not real important that you try and make them look real attractive at this point, as far as having a bit of red pepper and a bit of yellow pepper and whatnot on the top, because we're going to add one final ingredient to the top of this, and that we're going to put a little bit more shredded mozzarella. We've got a little bit of mozzarella reserved here that we're going to sprinkle over the top of this. It's about 1/2 cup that you would eventually divide over the 6 peppers that you've got here. And then the final thing you do is cover the whole thing with a bit of aluminum foil, because we want, for the first 30 minutes, it's going to cook at 350 degrees, and we want them to have a moist heat around them so that the peppers continue to cook, and they'll do better with moist heat. So this will retain the moisture around them, keep them from evaporating, or the moisture from evaporating. And after 30 minutes, you take the aluminum foil off, and then you just let them stay in the 350-degree oven for about another 10 minutes. Now, I've done one ahead of time for you, so I will get that one and we'll see what they look like when they're done. There you have it. Takes a little bit of time, but because it's something you can do ahead, it's well worth it. It's about 420 calories in one of these, but keep in mind, this is pretty much a single serving meal. And it adds some tomatoes on the side, particularly if you still have some fresh tomatoes out of your garden, or a salad, and you have a meal with a glass of milk. For Oklahoma Gardening, this is Barbara Brown.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.